The rain was relentless that night, slamming against the city streets in sheets, turning neon lights into blurred streaks of color. Shadows shifted in the alleyways, twisting and folding over themselves, hiding threats in plain sight. Somewhere in the distance, a car engine roared, then cut off, leaving only the hum of the storm and the occasional drip of water from a fire escape. Behind a rusted steel door, in the basement of a mansion nobody dared enter without permission, two small voices trembled. Their soft whimpers echoed against the cold concrete, muffled by layers of locked doors and security systems designed to keep the outside out, but never to protect them from what had already entered. A child's breath hitched in terror. Another whimpered beside him. What would you do if you discovered the ones you were sworn to protect had been trapped, helpless, and alone in a place meant to kill them? The air was icy, thick with the hum of refrigeration units and the sharp tang of fear. Each second stretched like an eternity. Someone had made a deliberate choice, a cruel, calculated decision, and now the consequences were dangling like a blade over innocent lives. Keep watching to see how far desperation can push a person, how far loyalty can bend, and what lengths someone will go to when the innocent are in danger. The heavy metal handle didn't budge. Whoever had done this had locked it from the outside. No one was supposed to be here. No one except the one in power who had orchestrated it all. The children's eyes, wide and terrified even in the dark, searched for a savior who hadn't arrived yet. Every heartbeat was louder than the last, every breath trembling with the possibility that they wouldn't survive. Outside the basement, the mansion stood quiet, elegant, untouchable. To anyone passing, it was just another fortress of wealth. Inside, it was a battlefield, a place where secrets festered and loyalties were tested. And tonight, the stakes had never been higher. Somewhere upstairs, decisions were being made. Alliances shifted in whispers behind closed doors. Someone had turned trust into a weapon. Someone had used innocence as bait. And the question remained, who would act before it was too late? What would you do if every second mattered? If one wrong move could mean the death of children too young to understand the dangers surrounding them? Would you freeze in fear? Or would you take the risk, knowing that courage might be the only thing standing between life and death? The wind howled through the mansion's empty halls, carrying the scent of polished marble and a faint trace of expensive perfume. It was an intoxicating, dangerous mix. Like the life inside these walls, beautiful, powerful, and deadly. And somewhere in the shadows, a pair of sharp, calculating eyes watched, waiting for someone to make the first mistake. Keep watching to see how loyalty is tested, how fear can turn to resolve, and how a single person with nothing to lose might become the only shield between innocence and destruction. Time was slipping. Every second brought the children closer to a fate that no one outside these walls could imagine. A fate written by the hands of those who ruled the mansion above. A fate that would demand bravery from the one who had never sought danger but could no longer walk away. And in that moment, in the hum of the refrigeration units, in the shadowed corners where the faint light barely touched, a choice had to be made. A choice that would echo through the halls of the mansion, through the hearts of the innocent, and through the mind of the one person brave enough to stand in the path of a world built on power, greed, and unthinkable cruelty. The mansion loomed like a fortress, its marble facade gleaming under the morning sun, yet hiding shadows that whispered secrets nobody dared speak aloud. Janice Monroe paused at the gates, her hands gripping the straps of her worn bag, heart hammering against her ribs. She had stepped into many houses before, cleaned many rooms, polished countless floors, but none like this. None with walls that held the weight of power, wealth, and a danger that could swallow a life whole. Her palms were damp, though she told herself it was only the heat of the early sun. She had come for work, for survival, for the money that could pay her grandmother's mounting medical bills. 6 months of scrubbing, cleaning, bending her back for crumbs of respect had led her here. And yet, for all her courage, her legs trembled as she imagined the life inside these walls. The mansion doors opened like jaws ready to consume the unwary, and Shanice took a tentative step forward. Each footfall on the marble echoed loudly, a rhythm that seemed to announce her presence to unseen eyes. The air inside was cool, smelling faintly of polished wood and faint cologne, the scent of a world untouched by struggle, untouched by need. And yet, the tension that hung in the halls was palpable. It was as if every shadow had ears, every doorway had eyes, and every whisper carried the weight of unspoken rules. She reminded herself of why she was here. Not for pride, not for recognition, but for necessity. Money for her grandmother, security for herself, a chance to survive in a world that had shown her little mercy. And yet, as she walked further into the mansion, she felt something else stir. Curiosity, the fragile flicker of bearing. Perhaps she could navigate this world. Perhaps she could endure it. Perhaps she could even thrive. The floors were silent beneath her shoes, and with every turn, she became more aware of the mansion's secrets. The portraits on the walls seemed to watch, their painted eyes sharp, assessing, waiting. She was an outsider here, a guest in a world of power and intimidation. But she was brave in ways she hadn't known until now. Brave enough to face fear for the sake of those she cared for. Brave enough to step forward into the unknown. She paused at the first door of the family wing, listening to the faint sounds behind it. Soft footsteps, a whisper of small voices, the delicate shuffle of toys across a carpet. The hum of electricity, of life, of secrets being kept. And in that instant, Chinese knew she had crossed a threshold. Not just into a house, but into a world she could never leave unchanged. Her chest tightened as she moved forward. Each step, a mixture of determination and apprehension. Fear was there, yes, sharp and immediate. A reminder, and the stakes were real. But so was resolve. A quiet, stubborn voice that whispered she could face whatever lay beyond the next door. Whatever danger, whatever moral cost. This was more than a job. This was survival, and survival demanded courage, even when it scared her more than she can admit. And somewhere ahead, in the rooms she had yet to enter, decisions were already being made that would test everything she had, everything she believed, and everything she was willing to risk for the fragile innocence hidden behind locked doors. The office was quiet, but not empty. Shadows clung to the corners, thick and deliberate, as though the walls themselves were aware of who walked through them. Lucian Blackwell's presence filled the room before he even stepped into the light. Broad, sharp, and precise, he moved with the kind of confidence that didn't need announcement. Power in motion. Quiet but absolute. Every gesture mattered. The way he adjusted his cuff, the slight tilt of his head, the way his eyes measured the space and everyone in it. He commanded attention without a single word. It wasn't just the suit tailored to perfection or the polished shoes that reflected the amber glow of the lamp. It was the aura, the unspoken understanding that this man could ruin lives with a thought and protect them with the same ease. He leaned against the edge of the massive desk, gray eyes scanning the room with cold calculation. There was no warmth here, no softness in the measured movements. Yet beneath the surface, a subtle tension lingered, almost imperceptible to those who weren't paying close attention. A flicker of something human, A hesitation, a slight exhale that carried more weight than the loudest threats ever could. Lucian's world ran on rules. Rules he set, rules everyone obeyed. Staff, family, rivals, they all understood the hierarchy. Cross him, and the consequences were immediate. Obey him, and safety was granted, though never freely. Every interaction, every command, carried the weight of authority, the sharp edge of danger. Yet even in his dominance, there were glimpses of a man shaped by more than ambition and violence. When the children's laughter or whimper reached his ears, his gaze softened, just slightly, as if he were remembering something lost long ago, a part of himself he rarely allowed anyone to see. Those moments were fleeting, swallowed quickly by the steel of his exterior. But they were there, a whisper beneath the roar of his power. To the world he was untouchable, unyielding, a figure who could crush and protect with equal precision. But to those who earned even a fraction of his trust, there was an understanding that he was not invincible. He bore burdens, decisions, and regrets that weighed on him as heavily as the reputation that preceded him. Every footstep in the mansion reminded him of control, every shadow a potential threat. Lucian Blackwell did not tolerate mistakes, but he understood loyalty and courage when he saw it. And in the rare instances when someone stepped close enough to glimpse beneath the surface, they saw a man who was dangerous, yes, but also capable of care, fierce and unspoken, for the few things in the world he still considered his. The hierarchy was clear. He was the apex. The children, the staff, even the fiancé who would enter later, all existed within a world he defined. But for all the dominance, all the power, Lucian Blackwell carried a quiet, almost imperceptible vulnerability. The kind that could unravel a person just as easily as fear could. A reminder that beneath the suit, beneath the cold exterior, was a man driven by more than control, by more than fear, by a loyalty he refused to show, except when it mattered most. And tonight, as the rain hammered against the windows and the city waited in darkness, the balance of power was about to be tested. Every decision, every glance, every small act of defiance or trust would ripple through the mansion. And in that tension, the danger was absolute. The mansion, polished and pristine on the surface, thrummed with life underneath. A life tangled in secrets, fears, and quiet battles that nobody outside would ever see. In the family wing, two small figures moved with the cautious energy of children who had learned too early that the world could be cruel. Marcus, sharp-eyed and watchful, measured every step, every word. He had seen betrayal in whispers and violence in the dark, yet his small frame carried the weight of intelligence far beyond his years. Beside him, Elijah clung to his stuffed lion as if it were a shield, a fragile barrier against a world that seemed determined to overwhelm him. His tears came easily, and his trust was even harder to earn. The children were innocent, yet they bore the echoes of the Blackwell Empire in ways they could not yet comprehend. They were emotional anchors, fragile hearts tethered to the chaos of a world far too large and dangerous for their age. And then there was Veronica Ashford, the fiancée who arrived like a storm in silk heels. Beautiful, calculating, and cold. She carried her intentions in every glance, every measured step. Where the children were soft and vulnerable, she was precise and predatory, testing boundaries, planting seeds of fear, and bending the mansion to her will. Her presence alone shifted the rhythm of the household, and it was clear she saw the boys not as family, but as obstacles could be removed. The staff, too, felt the tension. And not all of them were silent observers. Mrs. Kane, the head housekeeper, watched with sharp eyes, offering subtle warnings, quiet advice, and sometimes disapproving glances. Each staff member had their own allegiance, their own agenda, and in the hallways and kitchens, loyalties quietly shifted like pieces on a chessboard. A misstep could expose weakness, and weakness in this house was dangerous. Every room, every corner of the mansion carried whispers of conflict. Marcus questioned what he saw, trying to make sense of adult cruelty. Elijah trembled when doors creaked or shadows moved. Veronica's eyes lingered where they shouldn't, her motives hidden beneath a veneer of charm. And Shanice, new to this world, observed it all, the subtleties, the patterns, the tension that underpinned every interaction. The dynamics were delicate and perilous. Loyalty, fear, ambition, and love collided in ways that threatened to shatter the fragile order. Each choice, each gesture could tip the balance. One word from Veronica could ignite rage. One misstep by the children could provoke fury. One hint of courage from Shanice could change the course of everything. In this house, nothing was as it seemed. Innocence and danger intertwined, power and vulnerability danced, and the quiet, hidden conflicts shaped every heartbeat, every whisper, every shadowed glance. Every person had a role, whether they realized it or not, and in the looming storm of ambition and cruelty, the smallest action could have consequences no one was prepared to face. Keep watching to see how these fragile hearts navigate a world designed to crush them, how the predator tests the boundaries of innocence, and how courage, in its quietest form, may be the only thing standing between safety and ruin. Days passed in a rhythm that was both ordinary and tense. The mansion, with its polished floors and grand staircases, held a quiet magic for the children, though danger lingered just beyond their understanding. Shanice moved among them like a careful shadow, her presence steady, reassuring, a bridge between innocence and a world that demanded ruthlessness. Marcus watched her from the corner of his eye, sharp and questioning. He tested her with small provocations, hidden toys, sudden questions, moments designed to see if she would falter. But Shanice met his gaze with patience and quiet determination, never flinching, never pretending she knew more than she did. Slowly, piece by piece, trust began to form. He learned he could ask questions and not be dismissed, that he could express fear without ridicule. Elijah, younger and softer, clung to her warmth like a lifeline. The small hands gripping hers, the hesitant laughter that started to emerge, these moments were fleeting yet powerful. Through whispered stories at bedtime and gentle coaxing during playtime, she showed the children that not all the world was cruel, that some people could be steady, protective, and kind. But peace in the mansion was fragile. Veronica Ashford moved like a shadow over the family wing, her presence subtle but insistent. A raised eyebrow at the wrong moment, a soft word to a staff member laced with suggestion, the faint scent of perfume that lingered too long in the children's rooms. Every detail was designed to unsettle. She observed Shanice with thinly veiled curiosity, the quiet calculation of someone who saw loyalty and courage as threats to be tested. Small tensions began to build. A misplaced toy, an interrupted routine, comment that lingered too long. Veronica's subtle manipulation seeded doubt, planting questions that grew in the children's minds. Shanice noticed, quietly noting the shifts in mood, the way Marcus's eyes sharpened or Elijah clutched his lion tighter. Danger, Shanice realized, was rarely loud. It arrived in small doses, wrapped in politeness, hidden behind smiles, carried in footsteps on the polished floors. Even Lucien, powerful and intimidating, was not immune to the cracks in this fragile order. Rarely Shanice glimpsed him softened by moments with his sons, a hand resting on a shoulder, a careful gaze that lingered longer than necessary. These flashes hinted at a man capable of care, but they also reminded her how much danger could erupt in his absence, how quickly control could shift when ambition or resentment entered the space. And then there were the whispers among the staff, quiet conversations she overheard in hallways or behind doors. Small details, a A comment about a forgotten meeting, a subtle observation about Veronica's habits, a warning disguised as idle chatter. They were clues, pieces of a larger puzzle she didn't yet fully see, hints of conflicts brewing that could spill over into chaos. Chanice realized that every interaction mattered. A word spoken too quickly, a glance misread, a hesitation in judgment could ripple through the mansion, impacting lives that were both precious and fragile. She became hyper-aware, attentive to the children's moods, to the subtle shifts in Veronica's behavior, to the small but telling signs that not all was as it seemed. Through it all, the bond with the children strengthened. They laughed in small bursts, shared secrets in whispers, and began to let her into a world of trust they had carefully barricaded. And yet, Chanice knew that this fragile peace was temporary. The mansion, with its grandeur and secrets, was a place where loyalty, fear, and ambition collided. And soon, the first sparks of conflict would ignite into a blaze that threatened everything she had worked to protect. Keep watching to see how loyalty, courage, and innocence collide in a world ruled by power, how subtle threats escalate into danger, and how a single choice might determine whether these fragile lives survive the storm gathering around them. The night began like any other. Quiet falls, dim lights, the soft hum of the mansion settling into its bones. But sometimes danger doesn't announce itself with noise. Sometimes it arrives in silence. Chanice felt it before she saw it. A shift in the air, a wrong kind of stillness. The children's wing, usually warmed by the soft rhythm of their breathing, carried a tension that tightened around her chest. She stepped closer to Marcus's door, only to notice it half open. He never left it that way. Inside, the room was empty. A small ache formed in her stomach, sharp and cold. Elijah's bed was empty too. The sheets were tossed aside as if the boy had been pulled from sleep in the middle of a dream. Then she saw it, a single red feather lying near the window. Veronica's signature. A calling card she never used unless she wanted someone to know she'd been there. Chanice didn't shout, she didn't panic. She moved with purpose, instinct snapping into place. The mansion suddenly felt larger, darker, filled with corners where betrayal could hide. At the same time, Lucian Ashford stood in his office, staring at the shattered glass on his desk. A file he kept locked away was gone, one that held the truth about the children's mother, the secrets behind their inheritance, and the name of the person who had sold him out years ago. He realized then that the enemy he'd been hunting had always been inside his home. Betrayal had finally stepped into the light. Chanice reached the staircase when she heard it, a faint whimper coming from the lower hall. She followed the sound. The atmosphere thickened, each step echoing like a warning. As she approached the storage room, she heard Veronica's voice, low and venomous, wrapped in a strange gentleness that made it more terrifying. "You boys should have been mine. If you won't hand over what's rightfully owed, then I'll take it myself." The words froze Chanice for a moment. Then instinct overtook fear. She pushed the door open. Veronica stood with Marcus, gripped by the wrist. Elijah trembling behind her, tears streaking his cheeks. A knife glinted in Veronica's hand, casual but lethal. Her eyes widened, not in fear, but in annoyance, as if Chanice had interrupted a quiet moment. "Step back," Veronica warned, her voice sharp enough to cut. "This doesn't concern you." But it did. Every part of it did. The children clung to her in ways they had never trusted anyone else. Their safety had become more than a job. It had become a promise. Chanice's voice stayed calm, steady. "Let them go." Veronica's smile twitched, cold and tired. "You don't understand what's at stake." But Chanice did. She saw it in the children's trembling hands, in Marcus's eyes, filled with a fear he tried so hard to hide. She saw it in the way Veronica's grip tightened whenever she was close to losing control. This was no longer subtle. No more quiet tension. No more whispers in hallways. This was a threat that needed to end. Without waiting, Chanice stepped forward. Veronica jerked back, startled, her knife scraping the air. In that 1 second, Marcus pulled free and bolted toward Chanice. Elijah followed, stumbling, desperate. Veronica lunged. Chanice reacted on pure instinct. She shoved the children behind her, taking a defensive stance she hadn't used in years. The strike missed the boys by inches, clattering against the metal crate. Veronica hissed, furious, her secrets and schemes finally exposed under the harsh light. The children huddled behind Chanice, trembling, trusting her completely. In that moment, Chanice understood something clearly. This wasn't just a dangerous woman. This was a traitor willing to break a family apart for power. The only thing standing between innocence and destruction was her. The storm had finally broken open, and there was no turning back now. Lucian didn't summon her with words. He didn't need to. The moment the situation was contained and the children were safe, he simply gave a look, a quiet command that carried more weight than a shouted order ever could. Chanice followed him down the dim hallway, her heartbeat still uneven from the confrontation. The door to his private study clicked shut behind them, sealing the two of them in a world where truth had nowhere to hide. For a long moment, Lucian said nothing. He stood by the window, hands clasped behind his back, shoulders drawn tight. The glow from the city lights carved sharp angles across his face. He wasn't just a powerful man tonight. He was a father unraveling the edges of his own control. Finally, his voice broke the silence. Low, steady, but carrying a tremor only someone standing this close could notice. "You protected my children," he said. "Not because I ordered you. Not because you were paid to. You did it because you cared." Chanice didn't reply. She didn't trust her voice. The memory of Veronica's knife, the boy's fear, still played behind her eyes. Lucian turned to face her. The cold authority he carried in front of his men faded here, replaced by something quieter, something he rarely allowed anyone to see. "I should have noticed the cracks sooner," he said. "The shifts in her behavior, the secrets." His jaw tightened. Betrayal never comes from the outside. It always comes from those we let close. Those words hit heavier than gunfire. They weren't just about Veronica. They were about years of loss, lies, and buried scars. Chanice watched him, seeing the man behind the legend, the one who carried the weight of an empire and the fragile lives inside it, the one who had built everything out of loyalty, only to discover betrayal in his own home. Lucian stepped closer, his voice lowering. "I need to know something." He paused, searching her face. "Why did you risk yourself for them?" She held his stare. The answer was simple, even if saying it felt dangerous. "Because they're children," she said softly. "Because they needed me. And because loyalty means nothing if it disappears when things get hard." Something in Lucian's expression shifted, barely visible, but real. A crack in the armor, a hint of gratitude he didn't know how to express. He exhaled, slow and controlled, as if he'd been holding his breath the entire night. "You've earned more than a place in this house," he said. "You've earned my trust." Those words were rare, priceless, and dangerous. He looked past her to the closed door, the world beyond it, where enemies waited in the shadows. "What happened tonight wasn't random," he said. "It was a warning. Someone else is moving pieces behind our backs. Someone bigger than Veronica. And now I can't afford to trust anyone but you." The room seemed to shrink around them, thick with unspoken tension. Not romantic, something deeper, sharper, rooted in survival and consequences. Lucian stepped closer, his voice dropping to a whisper. From this moment on, you stand beside me. Not behind, not beneath, beside. It wasn't a promotion. It wasn't a request. It was a shift in power, a merging of fates. Janice felt the weight of his trust settle on her shoulders, heavy, dangerous, and unbreakable. In that quiet room, away from the eyes of the mansion, a new alliance formed, built on fear, loyalty, and the kind of unspoken bond that could either save them or destroy everything they both were trying to protect. The mansion had gone quiet again, but it wasn't the peaceful kind of quiet that settles after danger passes. This silence felt heavier, like the house itself was holding its breath. Janice walked the last hallway alone, checking the doors one more time. The boys were asleep now, clinging to safety the way frightened children do after a nightmare. She tucked Elijah's blanket in tighter, brushed a loose curl from Marcus's forehead, and let the soft rise and fall of their breathing steady her own. But deep down, she knew peace like this never lasted. Outside, thunder rolled through the sky, a storm building in the distance. Down in the shadows of the garden, hidden beneath the old stone archway, Veronica wiped the blood from her wrist and pressed a burner phone to her ear. Her voice trembled, not with fear, but with fury. They interfered, she whispered. The girl and the children. They ruined everything. A distorted voice crackled on the other end. Calm, cold, confident. Then you know what to do next. Lightning flashed, throwing her face into sharp relief, eyes dark with vengeance, lips curled in a broken smile. She looked back at the mansion as if she could see straight through its walls, straight toward the room where Lucian and Shanice stood closer than ever. They won't see me coming, she hissed. And when I'm done, there won't be anything left to protect. She closed the phone and slipped deeper into the darkness, swallowed by rain and the promise of chaos. Upstairs, Janice paused at the window, sensing something. A chill rolled up her spine, the kind that warns you right before a storm hits. Lucian stepped beside her without a sound. You feel it too, he said quietly. She nodded, eyes fixed on the blackened garden below, though she couldn't see anything through the rain. There's more to come, he continued, and the next move won't be subtle. The storm cracked open the sky, sending a bolt of lightning across the horizon. Janice whispered almost to herself, what will happen next? The lights flickered once, twice.